Okay, here is the video lecture for Urban Sociology, West Virginia State University. We are not meeting Thursday, like we talked about in class. So this would have been what I would have talked about in class Thursday. Probably I will have to break this video lecture down into 2 or 3 parts. You should be able to go to the web, go to the Resources tab, go to Unit 1 PowerPoint Shells, and click open the PowerPoint shell. It should read something like Urban Sociology and Social Psychology Part B, just like you see here. And you should be able to open up a shell. It's going to look like the PowerPoint presentation that I'm giving you, but it's going to have some obvious gaps where you're going to have to take some notes. So I would strongly recommend doing that at this time if you haven't done that already. I would do that before I went any further with the video. Just going to make your note taking a lot easier. So what we're going to do, we're going to progress through Chapter 3 and talk about the social psychology of the city a little bit. We're going to talk about some people, some famous urban sociologists, and some of their ideas. We'll start with Robert Park, and all of these people should be in your textbook. A few of these ideas and some of these people may not be. That's really why you want to get some good notes, but most of this should be kind of in your book at some level. Now, Park was an American sociologist, lived from 1864 to 1944. He conceived of the city as an organism, as a social organism, with distinct parts that were bound together by internal processes. A lot of people thought about cities, especially early on, as being characterized by chaos and disorder. You know, there's a lot of stimuli, a lot of things going on that you just can't quite make sense of. Well, Park kind of had a functionalist approach. If you've taken Intro to Sociology, one of the first major theories of sociology was functionalism, or structural functionalism, which kind of viewed society as like an organism that was bound together by, different parts. Think of your human body, for example. If your heart doesn't work, or if your brain isn't working, it's going to impact and affect your entire body and how it functions. Well, the same with the city. If one part of the city is sick, whether it be employment, the economy, institutions like religion or education, then it's going to impact the entire city. So urban life tended toward an orderly grouping of its populations and institutions, according to Park. Robert Park encouraged his students to develop detailed segments of the city to reflect these orderly groupings of its populations. So he said you could actually start looking at groups of people and you could start making sense of this chaos. You could study industrial workers, real estate officials, homeless people, prostitutes, etc. I'm going to adjust my camera just a bit, make sure we get it here. Some more with Park. Park suggested that life in the city would be less sentimental and less traditional. And we've kind of already talked about that a little bit. Max Weber kind of set the stage for this with his traditional and rational thinking. If you remember, we talked about that in class. I believe it was Tuesday at the very beginning of class. More traditional societies that are more, rural, if you will, are more sentimental. And when you get into modern societies where you have most people living in cities and urban areas, you have less sentimentality and less tradition. And he recognized cities could create some problems, but he also stressed that cities would enhance freedom, tolerance, and diversity. And certainly we can still make a strong case for that. The next person that I want to talk about is mentioned in your book is Lewis Worth. Lived from 1897 to 1952. Worth was also an American sociologist. He offered the first real sociological theory of the city. He stressed that cities were very large, which we kind of know, but in terms of population numbers, and even physical space at times, which could lead to increased diversity, a greater need for control. When you have more people and more densely populated, then there's a greater need for control. Greater specialization based on self-interest. And we've already talked about that. Some of the masters of sociology were pointing out, I think it was Durkheim we were talking about, pointed out that as we progress from more primitive to more modern societies, like where you see cities, you see people more dependent upon their differences. We count on people with different abilities, especially in cities, to ensure all of our survival in cities. And also greater human interdependence based on cash, based on money. Worth stressed that cities were dense, and we've already talked about what that means in class. Densely populated areas means you have a lot of people packed into a small space, okay? Which intensifies the effects of large population size on social life. Worth also stressed that that's a typo, it should be cities, not citied, so I don't know what happened there. Stressed that cities were heterogeneous, promoting physical and social mobility. If something is heterogeneous, hetero means different. So cities were very different people from different walks of life, different cultures from different countries, which promotes physical and social mobility. Worth also asserts that cities have a tendency to destroy traditional values and institutions. For example, the traditional institution of family. We talked about that in class a couple of times, where in our country 50, 60, 70 years ago, even though you had cities that were around, still you had a lot of people who were not quite living in cities as much as they are today. The whole traditional idea of what the family meant, the man would go to work, come home. The woman would be preparing meals and staying at home, being domestic, if you will. People would sit down. They would have dinner. They would talk. And now you don't really have that idea of what family is in cities is a lot different, because both people are, mother and father, or husband and wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, however you want to look at that. Both parties are working, and their lives are very busy. There's a lot of stimulation. There's a lot of activity. There are children that have activities. Rarely do families kind of sit down and spend time together. So Worth makes this argument, as do others, that cities have a tendency to destroy these traditional values and institutions like marriage and family and religion. Also, cities have a tendency to promote an impersonal way of life. In cities, we've talked about, people are always in a hurry. We got to get somewhere. We got to get from A to B to C to D. And we have all this stimuli around us with buildings and sounds and noise and jobs, and it just promotes a very impersonal way of life. We don't really take time to stop and to talk and to communicate and to get to know other people like you would maybe in rural areas or in societies that are not quite as advanced or modern as ours here in the United States. Also, Worth asserted that cities have to be counterbalanced with effective urban planning to make the city more humane. Worth asserted that cities in and of themselves were not the most humane places, or they didn't provide the most humane setting for people to get along with each other. So you have to have really good planning, and thought has to go into these cities to make sure that it's not too impersonal and that traditional values don't get destroyed too much. I think I found a good stopping point here. We'll call this the end of the first part for this video lecture. Thank you.